The French and Indian War, fought from 1754 to 1763, was a pivotal chapter in the struggle for control of North America. At the heart of this conflict lay a clash between two European powers, Great Britain and France, each vying for dominance over the continent's vast resources and lucrative fur trade. Territorial disputes, particularly over the fertile Ohio River Valley, fueled the flames of war. Both Britain and France claimed this strategically important region, seeing it as crucial for westward expansion and economic prosperity. The Ohio Valley's rich fur trade, a cornerstone of both empires' economies, further heightened the stakes. Adding to the tension was the growing rivalry between British colonists, eager for land and opportunity, and the French, who had established a vast network of alliances with Native American tribes. These alliances, forged through years of trade and diplomacy, provided the French with a formidable military advantage in the early stages of the war. The stage was set for a clash of empires, a conflict that would reshape the political landscape of North America and sow the seeds of revolution in the American colonies. The French and Indian War began in the dense forests of the Ohio Valley, where a young Virginian named George Washington led a small force of colonial militia against French troops in 1754. Washington's initial encounter at Fort Necessity, though a defeat, marked the beginning of a larger conflict. The early years of the war saw French and their Native American allies gain the upper hand. Their knowledge of the terrain and guerrilla tactics proved highly effective against the more conventionally trained British forces. In 1755, British General Edward Braddock led a disastrous expedition to capture Fort Duquesne, a key French stronghold in the Ohio Valley. Braddock's army, hampered by its rigid formations and unfamiliar surroundings, was routed by a combined force of French and Native American warriors. Braddock himself was killed, and his defeat sent shockwaves through the British colonies. The tide of the war began to turn in favor of the British in 1758 with the capture of Louisbourg, a strategic French fortress on Cape Breton Island. This victory, achieved under the leadership of General Geoffrey Amherst, cut off French supply lines to the interior. The following year, British forces under General James Wolfe achieved a decisive victory at the Battle of Quebec. In a daring maneuver, Wolfe's troops scaled the cliffs outside the heavily fortified city, surprising and defeating the French forces under the Marquis de Montcalm. Both Wolfe and Montcalm were killed in the battle, which marked a turning point in the war. The fall of Quebec, followed by the capture of Montreal in 1760, effectively ended French power in North America. The Treaty of Paris, signed in 1763, formally ended the French and Indian War and redrew the map of North America. France ceded Canada and all its territories east of the Mississippi River to Great Britain, while Spain, a French ally, ceded Florida to the victors. This treaty marked the end of French imperial power in North America and solidified Great Britain's dominance over the continent. The British colonies, now freed from the threat of French encroachment, could expand westward, fulfilling the dreams of many colonists. However, the treaty also planted the seeds of future conflict. The expulsion of France from North America created a power vacuum that would soon be filled by the ambitious colonists themselves, who were no longer content to live under British rule. In an attempt to prevent further conflict with Native American tribes and to consolidate its control over its newly acquired territories, the British government issued the Royal Proclamation of 1763. This proclamation, among other things, forbade colonial settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, a line that became known as the Proclamation Line. The Proclamation Line was intended to appease Native American concerns over westward expansion by creating an Indian reserve west of the Appalachians. However, it infuriated many colonists, who saw the fertile lands beyond the mountains as their rightful reward for victory in the war. Land speculators, who had invested heavily in western lands, were particularly outraged, as were settlers who had already crossed the mountains seeking new opportunities. The Proclamation Line became a symbol of British tyranny and fueled resentment towards the Crown. The French and Indian War had a profound impact on the relationship between Great Britain and its American colonies. The war had been costly for the British, and the government, saddled with a large debt, sought to recoup its expenses by imposing new taxes on the colonies. The Sugar Act of 1764 and the Stamp Act of 1765 were particularly unpopular. These acts, which levied taxes on sugar and molasses and required colonists to purchase stamps for legal documents and printed materials respectively, were seen by many as an infringement on their rights as British subjects. The cry of "no taxation without representation" rang out through the colonies, reflecting the growing belief that colonists should not be subjected to taxes imposed by a parliament in which they had no direct representation. The financial burden of the French and Indian War had far-reaching consequences. The British government, deeply in debt, sought to extract more revenue from its colonies, leading to a series of increasingly unpopular tax measures. These measures, coupled with restrictions on westward expansion and increased military presence in the colonies, fueled resentment and a growing sense of alienation among the colonists. The seeds of discontent, sown during the war, began to take root. The colonists, accustomed to a degree of self-government and wary of British interference in their affairs, viewed these actions as a betrayal of their rights. The stage was set for a showdown between the mother country and its increasingly defiant colonies. The French and Indian War, though a victory for Great Britain, had set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately lead to the American Revolution. The war had fostered a sense of unity and identity among the colonies, as they had fought and bled alongside British troops. However, the war's aftermath, marked by British attempts to assert greater control over the colonies and extract more revenue from them, had also sown the seeds of resentment and rebellion. The colonists, emboldened by their experiences during the war and angered by what they perceived as British tyranny, were increasingly unwilling to tolerate British rule. The legacy of the French and Indian War was a legacy of resentment, a legacy that would culminate in the American colonies' fight for independence. The French and Indian War was a pivotal event in the history of North America, marking the end of French imperial power and the beginning of a new era of British dominance. However, the war's costs and consequences had a profound impact on the relationship between Great Britain and its American colonies. The war had fostered a sense of unity and identity among the colonies, but it had also sown the seeds of discontent and rebellion. British attempts to assert greater control over the colonies and extract more revenue from them, coupled with restrictions on westward expansion, fueled resentment and a growing sense of alienation among the colonists. The French and Indian War, though a victory for Great Britain, had inadvertently set the stage for the American Revolution. The war's legacy was a legacy of resentment, a legacy that would inspire the colonists to fight for their independence and establish a new nation founded on the principles of liberty and self-government.